Good afternoon, and thanks for gathering back up, and we will now go over the Finance and Personnel Committee meeting, and thank you for being here with us. And as the Chairman Smith has already mentioned earlier today, please feel free, if you have questions, to ask questions, and we will save time at the end for questions or concerns you might have, but we have a fairly busy agenda today, mostly information, some action that we will take. And it's about to be the May time when we will really get into the budget for the upcoming year. So let's begin by calling the roll. Heidi?
Trustee Baker.
Here.
Trustee DeLay.
Here.
Trustee Freeman.
Here.
Trustee Jacobs.
Here.
Trustee Johnston.
Here.
Trustee Smith.
Here.
Trustee Tracy.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Heidi. Alan, if you want to come on up. Alan is truly an asset of this university. He and I talk quite frequently in between the meetings, and we've been over the agendas and are ready to go. First, we'll take the approval of the minutes. You'll find them tab 1. And for the folks who put the board book together, Daryl Freeman mentioned to President McPhee the professionalism of the book and the organization, and I do like it color-coded so I can find my section and don't have to worry about the other sections. So whoever came up with that, very appreciative. So we have
Kim and Pat,
Kim and Pat did it.
they did it.
Okay, at my direction. Kidding.
Just like a CEO. Just like a CEO, taking credit for everything.
Exactly. But we appreciate them every day. But page 3 is the minutes for the Finance and Personnel Committee of November the 13th. I would entertain a
Move for
motion.
approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And
Excuse me,
it's our-
who made the second? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Mr. Freeman.
Thank you.
Chairman Freeman. You got to watch them today, Heidi. They quick with their movements, which we like. Now, Alan, take over from tab 2.
Thank you, Chairman Jacobs and other committee members. Under tab 2, first item is an action item regarding policy 775, traffic, parking, and safety enforcement, along with an associated rule regarding that same matter that we will need to promulgate with the state of Tennessee. This policy has been in front of you before. Initially, we are getting ready to promulgate the rule, so we wanted to go through the policy one more time to make sure that we didn't need any changes or there wasn't any cleanup. And we found one minor change we wanted to make in the policy, and it's regarding a temporary disabled permit. Currently, it states in there that you can have it up to 6 months based on documentation and so forth. We felt it would be better for the students if we reduce that to 4 months. That coincided with our academic terms, so August to December, and then the spring semester, February through May, April. So we just wanted to make it, because what was happening is a student would get one when they came to school in August, and if it was good for 6 months, it would run into the spring semester, let's say in February, right in the middle of their academic semester, and then they would have to come back, get another doctor's note, get it re-established. So this way they can take care of that before the semester starts. So that's the only change that we would make in both the policy, and then that would be reflected in the rule. And Heidi, I don't know if you need to say anything about the rule promulgation, but.
No, just that again, this is a requirement that we promulgate a rule on this topic.
So we need a motion.
Yes, and a roll call vote.
So moved.
Second.
Now you'll call the roll.
Yes, sir. Trustee Baker.
Yes.
Trustee Delay?
Yes.
Trustee Freeman?
Yes.
Trustee Jacobs?
Yes.
Trustee Johnston?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
We have 6 ayes, no absence, no.
Great.
Under tab 3, it's regarding a building name change. It's the first one to come to the new board. As required by policy, the naming of a building, the approval for that lies with the Board of Trustees. The School of Agribusiness and Agri-Science, last July 1, 2018, had a departmental name change from Stark Agribusiness Agri-Science Center to Stark Agriculture Center. This was a name that goes way back, and it kind of is going back to the original name. Since that building is also named the Stark, it was also named the Stark Agribusiness Agri-Science Center. To line up with the department name change, we're recommending a name change back to the Stark Agriculture Center. It went through the building naming committee that is on campus that made a recommendation to Dr. McPhee for the name change. And then there's some additional information in your packet about the request and then the plaque regarding the Stark family.
So,
Alan,
oh, sorry.
Alan, you might want to add that we did have some conversation with family members that to make sure that there were no surprises.
Yes, that the Starks are a long time supporter of this university, a lot of involvement with the university over the years. So that was one that we wanted to make sure that they were in line with making this change.
So moved.
Second.
Joey,
We're ready.
in the interest of full disclosure, this is my home department and my building, so I may need to recuse myself, although I don't think it's controversial. I just want to let you know this is my department.
Okay.
Well, why did you not add fermentation to the school?
Well, we can still get some money from it, put his name on it.
We're trying to keep that under wraps.
Bush. Oh, no, go ahead. Heidi, ready to call the roll?
You can just take a
Oh, voice vote?
on this. Mhm.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Okay, tab 4 is MTSU Foundation Agreement. This is an agreement between the MTSU Foundation and the university, one that has been around for many years, and when we were under the Tennessee Board of Regents. We took that one that we figured was no longer applicable, needed to be updated. So we've worked with Comptroller's office, had sent out some information about updating your foundation agreements. So we've worked with them to come up with the agreement that's in your material, and it just really outlines the different responsibilities and roles of the university versus the foundation, and then what responsibilities have been assigned to the foundation of solicitation of gifts, and the housing of those gifts, and then using it for the benefit of the university.
May I ask a question or two?
Yes, please.
In our approaching 2 years on this board, I have heard about the foundation tangentially. I personally don't have a very clear understanding of the relationship between the foundation, the university, and this board. I hate to vote on something that I don't have much background or experience on. In other areas, we have had, I'm going to call it a tutorial or a class or an education. I would love for us to be able to understand this, perhaps have an education session for our board on the relationship with the foundation before we voted on this, if possible.
Stress the delay. I don't think that's going to be a problem. We don't have any urgency or deadline right now on that, Alan.
Not that I'm aware of.
Don't
Okay.
think so.
So what we'll do is we'll schedule that perhaps for our luncheon meeting coming up with the next month.
That'd be,
We certainly can do that.
Yes.
that'd be great.
So we will delay this, and Joe?
No pun intended.
President.
Delay.
Yeah. No, no, I was looking at Joe.
Double delay.
You said we did.
Delay.
He meant-
Oh,
delay.
yes.
He meant delay.
Have y'all been into that? Have you been into the fermentation? Samples, and you didn't share them on this side of the table?
Hanging with the bad boys.
Okay, so we have delayed. And,
So
that
to
works for me.
speak.
Okay, we can do
Okay
that?
for you guys?
Yes.
People hate me at
I
the
tell
airport. When I go to the airport, people, oh my God, delay at the
Don't,
airport. We
please
hate
don't.
that.
Please don't call that name.
Tab 5 is regarding the governor's 2019-20 budget. This information was sent to everyone previously the next day after the governor's budget came out. We are continually monitoring that budget as it goes through the legislative process. But you have in your materials just a summary of, first, a memo from me to Dr. McPhee just saying how it affects MTSU and the different components in that letter. There's also the email that went out, I think everybody received, that went to campus and the board members regarding the highlights of the budget and what was included in it for MTSU. And then lastly, you have a memo from THEC outlining the effect on all of higher education, including the other LGIs, the University of Tennessee, and then some of the indirect benefits that our students will receive, with one being an increase in TSAC grants. So we do benefit from those. It's not a direct benefit, but it's an indirect for our students. So we wanted to include this material in here. You've already seen most of it, but if you had any questions, we were able to answer those today. I will add that next week, Dr. McPhee has budget hearings for 3 days in a row,
I'm just so excited.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, with two chambers of the House, or two committees of the House and one committee in the Senate. So
So, Alan, I have a longer-term implication question. So, on the summary, for example, the budget that the governor has proposed funds the THEC recommendation for the salary pool, and we are there is an allowance for the university to add salary or change salary in addition to whatever is recommended by THEC. That part I understand that's correct. So my question is, in a given year, let's say this year, the university decides to increase the salaries beyond the 2.8% that the governor's budget.
now the governor's budget only had two.
I understand, or 2%.
Okay, yes.
My question is, next year, when the governor's budget is put into place, does it base the salary allocation on what the board does this year, or does it discount the salaries because the governor only said, I'm going to pay 2%?
Well, I have to go back a few years. What has been happening in the last few years is 1 year there will be an allocation for salaries specifically, like last year. And it says you had to set aside a pool of 2.5%.
Right.
This year, it did not say that. This year, it says state employees, there's a 2%, and then I think K through 12, there was a different percent. It says for higher ed, there is one number in the budget, tells you how much you're allocated, and it's at the discretion of the university, their institutions, to use that for operating and or salary as the university deems necessary. So it's up to the universities and the community colleges and institutions this time of what allocation they will
Right.
make toward salaries.
Right.
So next year, the governor's budget may be 2 different categories in like it was last year.
Right.
And it may say this is your operating allocation and this is your salary pool.
Gotcha.
We don't know from one year to the next.
So I guess more, let me rephrase my question. I
But
understand.
let me
everything.
try on that, on the second part of your question. You ask whether or not the governor and his staff take in consideration what the university did the previous year on
Right,
salary. Is that
right.
correct?
I'm trying to make sure we don't shoot ourselves in the
Yeah,
foot.
and the answer to that is no.
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Right.
So that's good. So they, yeah.
Well, question though, but the 2%, it's not 2% this year. I got it. But if it were, if it were making $100, then you went to 102, right? But if it was 2% next year, it'd be 2% of the 102.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
so
And that-
it's
It does
It's-
rebase.
Exactly.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That's why.
Well, let me clarify, because that's a very important question. The governor will not look, and when he put his budget together, to see that because I give 2% to faculty X, he's going to determine what he puts in for salary. That is completely a separate process.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah, that's all. I just want to make
That's a
sure
good
that was.
question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to read in the tea leaves of the administration's new approach?
No, because if you go back 2 years ago under Governor Haslam's budget, it was one allocation
Okay,
for one number. So that has kind of flip-flopped
okay.
over the last 5 or 6 years. So,
Also speak to, in previous years, they would say 2 and 2.5% when they actually mandate a figure, but they would only fund a portion of that. Speak to what's
Yes.
happening this year.
oh, well, and that's still the case. I mean, if you want to take part of your total allocation this year and use it for salary, you can take the whole amount and create your 2% pool, or you can take a certain percentage of it and then you're saying, okay, we need to go up on tuition to fund the other. It's still funded through the funding formula, so it is not funded any different than it has been in the past. It's still running through the funding formula, and we get about 55 to 60% of the amount of funding needed to do a 2% or what larger pool. Yes. So this will all factor into as we go through the legislative budget hearings and get a feel for that as we then go into, as Chairman Jacobs said, the next meeting as we're talking more about tuition and fees and salary and other information.
I also want to add that as we work with the legislature this year with regards to our priorities, one of our priorities, and it's been this for a number of years, is the improvement of salaries for our employees. And we see that's happening in state government. I think this administration gave a separate
Yes.
to bring up the market for state employees, right? This is the
18.5
second year.
million. Yes, and it was 25 million 2 years ago
Yeah.
for market adjustments.
Dr. McPhee, I was at a gathering on Saturday when an MTSU team member came to me and thanked me for the raises that are happening on campus. Out of the blue.
That's good.
Just made me feel good. Could have came and complained, but he didn't.
Okay,
What else, Alan?
anything else? If there's no other questions, we can go to the next piece. Tab 6, regarding our composite financial index, CFI, and the associated ratios that go with that. On the background information, we try to give a little bit more information on how those are calculated and kind of what the weights are in the total CFI. So there's 4 ratios. I won't go through and read each one of them, but kind of the first bullet under each one kind of tells you what they're, what they're telling you. The next one tells you what their weight is in coming up with the total composite financial indicator. And then the last bullet under each one just tells you, it's not the entire calculation, but a little bit about the calculation on how they're determined. Most of our ratios this year were either stable, or one was stable and then two increased significantly. And then we did have a decrease in one of those. So I was going to go over one, if you'll turn to page 87. It's the return on net assets ratio. If you'll notice, our big dips in that ratio was fiscal year 15 and 17, with a little increase or decrease in fiscal year 18. So in fiscal year 15 and fiscal year 18, we implemented two GASB financial statements that are required on how you account for state pensions and how you account for post-employment benefits other than pensions, which is mostly health care, your health care cost. Those are mostly accounting entries that you have to book in accordance with what state information you receive from our state of Tennessee, which is based on actuarial analysis of your state pension benefits and your other post-employment benefits. So that's why those 2 years are significant, took decreases from the year before. Now, also affected in that calculation on return on net assets is how much capital appropriation you receive each of those years. Now, capital appropriations, as you've seen in the budget, we're slated to get $35 million for the new concrete and construction management building. They don't give us that money up front and we use it. They give it as we spend it. Okay, so it's whatever construction you do and invoice during the year, and that's how much you show as an appropriation in that fiscal year. So in the current fiscal year we're in right now, fiscal year 19, you will not see for the academic classroom building, which we're working on now, was about that same amount. You will not see the whole $34 million that year because we will not be completed until next fall. So you might see somewhere between 15 and 20 million or 10 to 15 million. Just depends on how much progress they make and the invoices that are submitted. So I was looking back for this ratio, and in fiscal year 15, we had capital appropriations of 11 million. In fiscal year 16, we had 19 million. Fiscal year 17, 12 million. And fiscal year 18, 6 million. Now, as you know, academic classroom building, it was approved last year, but by the time we got the design and the architects and all that on board, we were 6 months into the fiscal year. So that's why last year we saw 6 million in capital appropriations. This year we'll see a lot more because we are working very heavily on the academic classroom building. So that's a little fluctuation on this one. It doesn't mean when you see a decrease in here that it's a negative, because capital appropriations, we're getting capital appropriations. The effect of that is what's moving the needle here. So if we didn't get those, so we would rather have those and see these changes than not have those capital appropriations. And some of the other institutions may not have those sways. If you look back since fiscal year 15, we were ending up with the new science building. We were working on Davis Science, the renovations to the old science facilities on Davis Science. We also now have started the academic classroom building, and then this coming year we're hopeful to start on the School of Concrete and Construction Management. So that's why you'll see that change on page 87 for the return on net assets.
So just for So if we didn't have the science building, what would that line look like?
It would probably be more of a stable line rather than, the fluctuation that you see now that's going up and down. And it also depends, you're also looking at I think that's the one that you're looking at your net asset, your ending net assets as well. So we're also adding in construction in progress on our balance sheet as we're going along too. So that's affecting it. So you wouldn't see as much of a dip. I can't tell you exactly. I'd have to go back and calculate it, exactly where it would be on this chart, but it would be within the watch level and the expected level for sure. But it would probably be more of a flat and
Gotcha.
and slightly decreasing.
But Alan, just help me provide a little color on the deviation between the expected level and our results and the LGI level and our results.
Okay. As you notice, the red line, of course, is the watch level. So that gets and the expected level, which is the green line. And on this ratio, that gets adjusted each year by the current higher education product. It's like the CPI, but it's for higher education. So as that thing is changing, they're recalculating this ratios. They stay the same. But this one gets recalculated. So from fiscal year 17 to 18, the expected level went from 4.63 to 5.87. So it's constantly, it's kind of like a moving target. Then when you look at the average of the LGIs, you'll notice that they took and the average took a dip this year, a pretty significant dip. So we are pretty close to the average now, where last year we would not have been. But that's also where, there's appropriation. And, some of those are getting some capital appropriations, but not as much as we are. So we're affecting that. They're a little higher than we are because that is not affecting them as much as it is us. I mean, some of them did get some capital appropriations but not at the significant level we have. Because if you remember, our science building was $147 million. So, and that.
Trustee DeLay, go back to his initial point about the difference. I mean, we much rather see this chart than to see our lines like the LGIs, because it means that we're not
Getting any
really
capital.
benefiting.
Right.
Yes. So that's the important distinction in reading.
So, Alan, this also says when we're in a building mode, lesser reserve ratio, lesser operating reserve ratio
Correct.
in
Yes.
general.
Yes. Well, now that the state has the building match, that's having to come from the institution, in some form, whether it's through fundraising or part of the facility student fee, that's eating into the reserves that are there for that use. So like the facility fee, that's what that fee is for, is to help with the match. And that's why that fee was implemented years ago, is to help with that building match. Of course, back then it was 25% of the first 75,000, which now we're about 10% or 5% of that. So,
Thank you.
Before you move on, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Chairman. 'Cause
Well,
you talk about a facility fee. I know, Joe, you and I and the group have talked about this, and speak to the kind of fee that UT Knoxville has for facilities
Right.
compared to what we.
their fee is, I think it's 100, but I know it's very close to 100. I'm going to say approximately 100, but, so theirs is $100. Ours is $30. So
is that per semester?
it is per credit hour.
And how much is a credit hour at
Per semester.
Okay, that is semester because it's a program service fee. You're right.
15
Yes.
or something.
Yes.
That'd be $1,500. That'd be
I'm way down in the weeds here,
semester.
but
if you did it that way.
we got
If it's
round figures, $6 million
how much money,
of industry
credit
money
hour, it kills
from
like 15
Congress.
hours.
Who holds that $6 million?
That is currently, right now, that is with the concrete
Well, currently, most of that money is in pledges that will come to us. We've got commitments because the challenge we face when building any building is we don't have a defined timeline. So when we raise money for a building, we get donors to commit to provide the funding. And then in case of concrete industry, it said, once the state approves it, they have 120 days to start paying pledges. And you do that because nobody wants to give you money, like our science building took 12 years to build. They don't want you holding money for 12 years. We will end up with all that money. All that money will come through us.
So we're gonna have it in 6 months, 120 days, I can do, but
It'll start paying, and it'll
in
pay off.
6
over-
months, July 1, we'll have all of it.
They'll start paying. A
No, it
lot of
hadn't
the
been
pledges are
approved
life of the
yet.
building. They're 3-year pledges.
Right.
It's just in the budget, it
Yes,
hadn't
sir.
been approved.
But by July 1, hopefully it
Right.
Yeah,
would have been approved.
whenever it gets approved
So-
through the General Assembly, yes.
December 31 of this year, you'll have the 6 million.
No, well, pledges are anywhere from 1 payment to 3-year payments, depending on the larger gifts, the $250,000 and the $500,000 pledges they've got. Most of those are 3-year pledges.
And
But to your question, I think whatever that amount is that they're paying on that pledge comes to us.
Comes
It's
to
not
us.
held elsewhere. I
Yeah.
think that was the question you were trying to
That's
get at.
one, I guess I was heading towards, when do you use that for the last payment?
no,
So when do let's say we had the 6 million,
Mm-hmm.
and we got a $30 million building. Is that the first 6 million you spend on the building?
they were saying a couple years ago that's how it was going to work. They were going to use the match funding first and then use that. So what is actually happening is they are doing it proportionally. So as they make each payment, if they're taking 10 million or 10,000 out of this pot of money, they're taking 1,000 out of this, or whatever the ratio will be. So you're using the match through the life of the project.
Well, where I was getting to is that there ought to be a good amount of earnings on it. And I don't know what we earn, but you can get 3% in the savings account now. I mean, that's come up from 40 basis points. And that 6 million, you can do the math, but before you know it, that's 180,000. Before you know it, it's pretty good change there. Does that go back into the 6 million? Or does that go to baseball
Well-
team, or where does that go?
Well, when you start a project and there's a match required, you are required to set up a local government investment pool, LGIP, at the state level, and put your match funding in there, as you get it, So, and that is an interest-bearing account under the Department of the Treasury. So, and we are credited that back.
So who gets the interest?
Well, it goes.
Because you've raised 6 million. You're with me. I mean, there's a pretty good float there, right?
Right. And, well, we would use that account until, let's say it's the end of the project, that money is returned back to the campus. And then what we usually do is these projects a lot of times have to get scaled back a little bit because by the time you get funded for a project and then the time you build it, we've had to cut some stuff out of the project, mainly, equipment or something. So what we've been doing is allowing that then to be used to finish up any equipment needs for that department in that building.
It's in the weeds, Mr. Chairman, but since this one's brand new starting, concrete's just starting, we got a finite number we've raised. I'd like to see, if I'm here 3 years from now, we finished up, we earned this much interest, we can buy books with this much for it, just because I'm curious about that.
Yeah. And we'll have all that, yeah.
The other one that I'd like to have is on the LGIs, I'd love to see, and go ahead and include University of Tennessee if you want to, but I'd like to see a breakdown instead of an average. I know you get there, but
Right.
just not every quarter necessarily, but
You
once a year.
want to see who we're beating.
Well, I want to see how we're being, because that's who Sydney's got to argue with the legislature on funding, and we're competing against the other LGI.
Well, the reason we show averages at this meeting is because all the other LGIs are showing average as well, because not everybody has shown their own CFI to their board. So we've been trying to be respectful to the others until everybody has shown their own numbers to their own board, and then we can come back and definitely show you each individual.
I agree with your chart. I'm for, and it's good.
Alan,
Just as a footnote, I'd like to know the LGIs, here's how they.
So we can bring
Yeah,
that back.
thank you.
along the same line, Joe, you've been doing this long enough. In the business world, using the word pledges makes me nervous. Unless you're dealing with schools or things. And in the real world, I could no more have booked somebody to pay me for a load on a pledge than Man and Moon. But in that span of time, in collecting that X dollar, $6 million, the pledge is not a contract.
No, it is. It is a contract.
Oh, it is a contract. Okay. Well, then that,
We might, and typically in philanthropy, it's still up to the organization to decide, are you gonna hold somebody to that pledge?
Okay.
But our default rate is very low.
okay.
And I know where you're going, and that's fairly common. No, we write
Okay.
ours. It is a
I
donor
got you.
agreement that
That's a
specifies a
different word
payment
then.
plan and all of that. And it is a legally binding contract. It is up to you chose to enforce it or not. If somebody went bankrupt, there's not much you can do.
And that's where I'm coming from. I mean, there are business
Absolutely.
economics that go up in corporations that they can't control to, so, okay.
So
JD, we can get you a pledge form anytime you
I
want.
bet you can. Yeah.
Well, and
But it'd be a pledge, not a contract.
Trustee Baker, that's a very, very good point. As we do the fundraising and get these commitment, we don't take that seriously until they sign that contract. Because it's easy to say, I'm going to give you $10 billion of $500,000 and no real obligation. You start the project and then you find yourself in a.
Sure.
And so we've done over about $1 billion worth of construction over this period of time.
Approximately $1 billion, yeah.
And we've never had a problem. I've known some institutions that perhaps didn't do a contract, started the facility, and then find out that you have to. But we know not once in our construction.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, that's well managed and lucky, because one of our universities in Nashville, private university, had a pledge for their athletic complex. And the guy's stock went from, I'm giving the wrong number, but from 100 to 10, and he just said, I can't
Can't
do
do
it.
it.
I mean, it ain't there. And eventually it'll happen to us.
Hopefully not.
Well, hopefully,
I'm always a positive,
I
optimistic.
understand. But the slippage is very little, is what you're saying.
Yes.
6% or?
And what we try and do, what we encourage the concrete people to do, is not call it success when you've hit the base number. When we did our science building, we had a number in the science building, we exceeded that number. So the thought being, yes, you're going to have things change, people's stock values are going to change, life situation changes, and you are going to have an occasional default. It's just the reality. But the vast majority of gifts in the 6 and 7 figure range are done in multiple year payments.
Sure. One more. So, how long of stretch will they give you to credit you? Because we got the athletics things coming up, and we're gonna raise this much money. So, how long before they, if you give a 10-year pledge, the state wouldn't, of course, we're not talking about that.
Yeah,
That's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
So, but on this one, how long, 3 or 5?
5 is the most we have. I think we've got $1.5 million pledges, $100,000 a year for 5 years.
Got it.
Everything else, I believe, is 3 or less.
And you want to try to hit the 3, because that kind of gets you into your construction
Right.
kind of phase, and you've got all your pledges by the time you're completing the project.
And Mr. Chairman, just, once this was in the governor's budget, we notified all of the companies involved and said, just so you know,
Calling your bluff.
it started happening. I had the first check 2 days later. They're already starting to pay. So, yeah, we feel very good about that. Concrete Industry Association, through their auction, they have a reserve too. And we're hoping they're gonna go ahead and pay their commitment early because they've got a reserve. But, so we feel good that we're in good shape with the money.
They actually announced, I was at that convention and made a presentation to the National Advisory Board, and they said specifically at that meeting that the reserves that they have, they will help MTSU with its building.
Fabulous.
All right.
Okay.
Here's your chance. You've got Alan here. And we've got time. Now, I would offer Alan, anytime during, in between meetings, if you have a question,
Yes,
please feel free to
please.
call Alan.
Yes. And we
We'll
can
be glad to
have a
talk.
one-on-one conversation and go over any of the numbers you want to.
All right. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Seeing no other further business on the agenda, has anybody got anything they want to bring up? I need another motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? This meeting's adjourned.
Efficient.
There we go. Good job.
Excellent.
Good job, Joey.
Going to reconvene at the fermentation.